back. Okay, so we are starting now the topic of risk, right? What do you know about risks? Have you studied risk earlier?
Yep, these are the
Okay,
bad things that may or may not happen.
yeah, right. Very good. So let us look at the nature of the risk. Risk is a condition of uncertainty. It is something which is likely to occur, but it may or may not occur, right? But if it does occur, it will cause certain damage. But that raises a question, are all the risks bad?
No, some of them can be good.
Some risks could be good. What do you call a positive risk?
Opportunity.
Is an opportunity, and a negative risk is a threat. That means risk is not by default a negative term. Risk is just indicating an uncertainty. That uncertainty may result in something good or it may result in something bad. If it results in something good and positive, we call it an opportunity. And if it results in something bad or negative, we call it a threat. That means this uncertainty, when it gets closer to you, there are signs of impeding risk that, we knew this could happen. For example, we knew that it always rains in this weather. That is normal. We know that. But what is the indication that rain is just about to come? What is the
Mm,
trigger condition for that?
the train is
How would
about
you know that rain is about to come?
the skies are dark.
Sky gets dark, there's a lot many clouds up there and things like that. So they are indicating that there is the likelihood of rain has suddenly increased, and in a short while it may start raining. Now, the interesting thing I tell you about the risk is, if we take an action to eradicate a risk much before the trigger condition, that money might go for a waste because that risk may not occur at all. But as soon as the trigger condition is invoked and we are now having a high likelihood that this is now about to occur, you should take action immediately. The response to that risk, you might have planned it already. You might have planned it already, but actual action on that response will be taken after the trigger condition has indicated that risk is just around the corner. So far, so good.
Yep, so far so good.
Is it possible that you can identify all possible risks in a project?
No, no, a lot of them happen during the project.
Right. That means we may have some idea from our experience that this kind of thing can happen. So, based on our experience, we try to identify as many risks as possible. And all those risks which have been identified, they are called the known risks. But they are still uncertain, but at least we know that these risks might occur. But there are so many other risks which could occur, but we don't have an idea. We can't think about them. We can't conceive them. Such risks are known as unknown risks. Rather, there is yet another classification. They say known known. Known known is that risk which we know it might occur and we know how much damage it causes. So we are very comfortable with this risk because we understand it completely. A known known risk is which we understand completely. A known unknown risk is the one which we have an idea that it can occur, but we don't know how much damage it can cause. That is a known unknown. Then we have got a unknown unknown risk. That is, we have absolutely no idea what can happen to us. Okay, one more thing on this slide. Can you tell me the difference between a risk and an issue?
Issue is the risk materializing already. Like
Very nice, very
it
nice.
confirms it is something that will have that is happening.
Right. So I agree with you. When a risk occurs, it materializes, it becomes an issue. Right? Okay. Tell me, will the risk also remain there when it becomes an issue, or risk would be eliminated?
Uh, that's a good. The risk will remain open with the unless the issue is resolved, and or unless that I don't know if the tracking of issue and risk is the same. It's just the flagging is different. From risk, it becomes an issue. The
Okay,
risk is not there; it's replaced by an issue.
right. Okay.
Well, what was the rate?
Why do we call a risk a risk? Because there is an element of uncertainty in it.
Hmm.
The moment this risk has occurred, is it any is it still uncertain?
No, it's already certain.
So as soon as a risk occurs, it ceases to be a risk. We don't call it a risk anymore,
Okay.
right? And if there it raises a problem for you, that is called an issue. Now,
Okay.
issue is a physical reality. Issue is on hanging on your head. It is not a risk. It has happened. You have to act immediately to resolve this issue,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
So when a risk occurs, it ceases to be a risk and it becomes an issue. Okay, one more question about it. Can there be issues without risks?
Yes, yes, these are because that means we didn't see it coming at all.
Say again?
Yes, it's possible. It's usually because we didn't see them coming.
Right. That means there was a risk. There was a risk which you did not see coming. There was
Hmm.
an unknown risk. You could not conceive it, but risk was there. So issue cannot exist without a risk. Whether you identified that risk or you did not identify it. But remember, behind every issue, there is a risk. Always. Whether you know it or you don't know it. Because we could not identify that risk until it occurred. So we start calling it issue. Right? But I must tell you that even if a risk has occurred and you never knew about it, when it became the issue, you must note down in your booklet that this kind of risk can also happen, and in my future projects, I will consider this eventuality. So behind every issue, there is a risk.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Clear.
Okay, these are some of the basics. Let us look at the Shoppe Lifestyle Center example, the case study. The project manager and Fen has been asked to identify major risks in the project. He came up with these risks. How do you find them? Are they really the risks? Or you don't feel that they qualify to be a risk?
There are risks.
All of them?
Um, but I would, for example, key stakeholder conflict. I will not probably raise. No, they are possible. It's all possible.
Mhm.
They're all possible risks.
They are all possible risks.
Mm.
But they are very poorly structured.
Oh.
They are not, well, it says building code compliance. Well, what is the risk in it? Building code, we comply all the time. What is the risk in it? Risk is that we may not be able to comply with the building code. That is the risk. So I would say, yes, of course, they indicate project risks, but these are not very good statements for the risk. They should, kind of show the risk very, explicitly. For example, in a project, if I ask you what is the risk, you tell me time is the risk, right? What can I do with the time? This is too not a very good identification of a risk. Tell me exactly why you think that there must be maybe a risk to the time. You said you got me that there might be delay in time, but why? Please try to indicate the actual reason for it, actual risk for it. So risks should be very well structured. They should be very accurately defined, and they should not be arbitrary statements like code compliance, like stakeholder conflict. There is no conflict. In every project, there is conflict. Tell me your problem. Tell me why you think that there will be high level of risk due to the conflict. So my only input is that yes, of course, project manager has done um, some job in identifying these risks, but at the same time, he did not define them very well. Got it?
Yep. Understand.
How would you like to define a risk? Tell me a risk. Let's do an exercise on that. Tell me a risk from your one of your projects.
Uh, um, okay. There there is a risk that the system will not go live on time
Mhm.
because
That is a
the
result. That is
stakeholder.
not a risk.
Uh,
You are
uh,
showing me the result. This will
uh,
happen.
okay, okay, okay.
What is the reason?
The the product owner just added two new requirements
Hmm.
that needs to be part of the release, so that
Okay.
we will not be able to complete those two new changes on
Okay.
time.
I would say this is the cause.
Okay, okay.
This is the cause. What is the risk? You understand? There is a cause to a risk, and there is an effect of the risk. First, you told me the effect of the risk. Then you told me the cause of the risk. But you had also to tell me what exactly is the risk.
Okay. Release will not the target release will not be complete already
Okay.
by let's say
I
by
would
end.
say, I would say the statement of risk should be divided into three parts. First,
Okay.
you tell the cause, then you tell the actual risk, and then you tell what is going to be the impact of that risk. So this will be a three-part sentence.
Okay. Okay. So um product owner added two new requirements
Mhm,
for the upcoming release by end June.
mhm,
We won't be able to complete it on time.
in time.
So the release by end June will be delayed.
Okay, let me try it on. For example, there is a risk due to the inclement weather. Inclement weather is the cause,
Mm.
right? And the
Mm.
risk is it might rain,
Mm.
which will cause my work to be delayed.
Okay.
So the inclement weather is the cause, rain is the risk,
Mm-hmm.
and effect is the delay. So we are sometimes very wrong that we are trying to say that delay, which is the effect, that is not the risk. Effect is not the risk,
Mm.
right? Neither the cause is the risk. Risk is in between them. Between the cause and effect, there is a risk. There is an uncertainty. You actually have to identify that. So in future, when you are doing risk assessment with your team, you must guide them to phrase the risk in the right manner, because only then you can find a good solution for that. Otherwise, you are not yourself clear what actually is the risk. You might be addressing the wrong cause, right? Okay, tell me, can there be more than one causes for a risk?
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. So, if you find that there is a risk which has got five causes and two effects, so you have got all the risks identified. The cause for the first risk, one of the causes, is also is indicated in many risks. You understand my point?
Mm-hmm.
For one risk, there are five causes. One of those causes is also the cause for another risk, and another risk, and another risk. So that would be a good opportunity for you, that the cause which is causing many risks, if you can eradicate that cause, many risks can be healed out of it. Do you agree with me?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can also look at it from another angle. For example, delay is a big problem for you. The effect on delay is is really a problem for you. You don't want that to happen. So maybe you say all those risks which are causing any kind of delay are my first priority to solve.
Okay.
See how interesting it becomes.
Mm.
Anyways, I am not going into much detail of that, but I think it is sufficient that I've told you that risk should be phrased in such a manner that there are three segments to the statement of the risk. One, the first one is cause. Second one is the risk itself. And the third one is the effect. That is a well-phrased, well-worded risk. And now you can deal with it with more accuracy. The word risk came from the business world. Whenever you initiate a new business, you start a new business, you have a likelihood of either profiting from it or getting a loss out of it. So business risk could be classified in only two categories, either the gain or the loss. That's it. If it is a gain, it is an opportunity. If it is a loss, it is a threat. But project risk management is more detailed, and it doesn't only talk about the good and bad, it talks about the whole dynamics of the risk, what can affect what in the project. So project risk management is a more detailed discipline which systematically maximizes the probability of positive events. Meaning the positive risks, we want them to happen, not you. If there is a positive risk, if there is an opportunity, do you want to evade it, or you wish that you could this could happen? If there is a good risk, will you avoid it?
No, I will accept that. That's probably one of the things I'm waiting for to happen. So I would love
Yes,
positive
you want
opportunities.
that to happen, and therefore you would either try somehow to increase the probability of that risk, or the amount of benefit coming of it, the effect of that risk, you would like to enhance that. That is how we deal with the risk. For positive risk, we maximize the probability and the consequence. And as far as a negative risk is concerned, our strategy is reversed. We want to minimize the probability and the consequence of a negative event. Right? So positive risks, we have a different strategy. Negative risks, we have a different strategy. We maximize in the positive event and we minimize in the negative event. Agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Now, as far as the risks in agile or a hybrid project is concerned, uh, trust me, I am not wrong in saying that in agile projects, they are more risky. They are much more risky, much more complex than a predictive project. Predictive project is just a walk in the garden. Predictive project may have risks, but they are not as complicated and as severe as we could have in an agile project. Always remember that. I have also shown you a chart in which I told you the requirements are uh, kind of clear to me, and I have the authority to do that job, that there is no uncertainty about the requirements and about the authority. So such a project should be done in a predictive manner. If at all there are any risks, there are going to be a couple of risks only. But if you see that requirements are changing on the daily basis, people are working in a haphazard manner, there are in a chaotic situation, in a complex project, we will have unclear requirements, unclear authority, and thus we will have many-fold more risks. Agile is the way to address that situation. Predictive projects can handle the risks up to a certain level, beyond which they become completely redundant. For a very complex or complicated situation, you should pick agile as your way of working.
Okay. If so that if certainty is high, go for predictive. If certainty is low, especially if requirements change on a daily basis, is also complex, better to use agile.
Yes. So when the certain things are quite a bit certain, only a couple of things are uncertain. That is the dynamics of a predictive project. This is a predictive project you are dealing with. So if you have to make a choice, you would say, okay, we can deal with it in a predictive manner. But if you see that this is a very complex project, it's a very complicated project, there are a lot of uncertainties in it, then you have to, take the step very carefully, right? It is not the game which you can play with the predictive. You have to go agile. And if there is a in-between situation, meaning partially there is, we know the uncertainty, there is a little bit of uncertainty, but is more than what we can handle, meaning we are getting into a little bit of complication, then probably we should choose a hybrid method. There could be many other reasons. Maybe your organization is in habit of doing all the projects in a predictive manner, so we cannot directly jump into agile project management. So such an organization, we can train them to slowly and steadily move towards hybrid. And once they're proficient in hybrid, we can train them and coach them into agile project management. But that normally people do not accept agile at the face value, especially when they have been doing projects all their lives in a predictive manner. They don't trust the agile. But remember, agile is to deal with the complexity. As project uncertainty increases, complexity increases. The risk of rework also increases. There is a tendency that we will do things wrong and ultimately we'll end up paying more, right? In such a situation where the uncertainty is high, or we can say very high, adaptive life cycle or agile life cycle use smaller increments of work. Like you remember, we just work in small iterations of 2 weeks, right? So I'm not dealing with the whole risk. I am dealing only at one time with the risks of that iteration, right? So I have reduced my load of risk management by a considerable level. So by bits and pieces, I keep doing my project and I keep doing my risk management in every iteration without worrying about the next iteration. That way, we can handle even a very complicated work, a very complex situation. We can handle it by bits, right? There is a saying, if someone asks you how to eat an elephant is many times bigger than you, but you are supposed to eat it. How would you eat it?
Chop it up. Chop it
Exactly.
first.
Chopping it up into very small pieces and then eating one piece at a time, right? You can't eat the whole elephant in one go, right? So Agile does exactly the same. It, you know, do the work iteration by iteration and keep resolving the issues and risks while the iterations are going on. And there is not much of load. Your plate is never full, right? It is always comfortable number of items on your plate that you can eat easily. When you have eaten it all, then you can fill it again until you can eat as much, right? And there is no hurry. You can finish the elephant in 1 year. There is no problem, right? So this is the philosophy we have in Agile, that slow and steady wins the race. But actually, we are not slow and steady. Basically, I would say Agile is much faster because there are a lot of redundancies and waste of time which we eradicate while we do work in Agile. And you will be amazed to learn that Agile projects can do the work many times faster because of these efficiencies they are gaining. Careful planning, doing small work at a time, and slow and steady moving forward, not committing any mistakes. In a predictive project, you do not plan things well and you commit a mistake, that is going to go a long way, because it might impact the whole project. You will get back to the drawing board. You will start planning everything right from the beginning, and it will waste a lot of time. And you will be doing this exercise many times in a predictive project. In Agile, we don't do that at all. We just start working, right? And just start a compilation. We deal with many times more risk in Agile, and still we gain an ability to do the job faster than usual. Does it make sense to you?
Yep, yep. Although, how to say,
Mhm.
um, there are times, or actually even often, probably this is in the software area. We actually try to avoid telling our stakeholders that just because just because we're doing agile, that means we're gonna complete something faster,
Why don't
because
you want to tell it to customer?
it's not,
Customer will be pleased to know that we can do faster. Why don't
actually,
you want to tell them?
because we're not doing it faster. Like how
No.
to say, we're able to deliver pieces of the work with value earlier. Like they're able
Uh-huh.
to get something tangible earlier with agile and be able to fix it earlier versus getting it at the end.
Actually, that is not a good strategy.
Mm,
If you are working on an agile project, then it is not your team which is agile. It is a complete agile mindset we are working in. Our
mm,
bosses are agile. They are thinking like agile. Our
mm,
customer is agile. Everyone is agile. And all of them have correct, you know, expectations from the project,
mm.
right? The
Okay.
expectations from a predictive project are very different.
Mm,
You can't be an agile team working in a predictive environment where nobody respects you, nobody understands you.
mm.
So there is no benefit of doing agile work when the others can't appreciate it.
Agree.
So
But
before you can start doing agile projects, you must kind of spread some awareness in your organization, higher ups, other departments, and
mm,
even your customers. If they all understand what is agile, how does it work, then they will set their expectations accordingly. And
mm,
I would say there is no harm in telling them that we can do it faster, and you can change the requirements as well whenever and whatever you want. They will be
okay.
amazed. How is it possible that we are changing the requirements continuously and still these people are claiming that we can deliver faster? We can deliver with more accuracy. How is it possible? It is possible just because of the new approach we are adopting. The way of working is such that that would result in that. And that understanding should be given to the customer, given to your bosses. Everyone, the organization should understand what and how we can benefit from Agile. If you hide it from the customer, that means customer is expecting this thing to be done in, say, 10 weeks, right? So we have done it in 3 weeks. What are you going to do? Are you not going to deliver it to the customer?
Of course, we're gonna deliver if it happens earlier. But it's not about the discussion on weeks. Like these are projects that um, truly takes a year or more. And then
Right.
when we talk to them about agile,
But time
then
is not a limit for us.
yeah,
If your customer understands that we are
mm,
doing an agile project, they would know time is not a limit,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
right? So don't try to apply predictive principles to agile.
Mm,
Agile is a completely different ball game,
mm,
and there has to be a agile mindset around our agile project.
mm,
Once again, I would say it is not only the agile team which is agile, but the whole environment has to be agile,
mm.
right? Only then they will be able to appreciate what you are doing and how they can benefit out of it.
Okay, got it.
Okay, good enough. Let us move on and let us dive deeper into some more of the concepts. Okay, tell me, what do you mean by appetite? Just forget about risk management. What is appetite?
Do they want to usually appetite I use it for risks, so it's more of are people willing to take the risk or not.
Yes, you are right. But I was asking just the word appetite, not the risk appetite. What do you
Okay.
mean by appetite?
um Whether it's like want to eat or not.
Yeah, yeah,
high
yeah,
high
exactly,
appetite want
exactly.
high appetite want to eat, low appetite
Yeah,
don't want to eat.
this is the hunger you have at
Mm,
any point in time, right? If you are
mm,
more hungry, you have higher appetite. If you are less hungry, you have lesser appetite. Now let's look at it from the risk point of view. How much risk can you take? If you have a higher appetite, you say, okay, no problem. I can take these risks simply without any problem, right? But on the other hand, there is another person whose appetite is very less. If I give him one risk, he starts, shaking. He is completely worried. He loses his calm. This person has less appetite to take the risk. Taking the risk means how much risk can you accept without flinching an eye. But for every person, there is a limit. Every person may have a different appetite. So there is a limit. You can absorb certain risks, but there is a limit to that. Beyond that, you have reached your appetite. You can't take any more risks after that, right? For example, an organization has spared 10% of their budget for risk management, right? That means their appetite is 10%, right? They are expecting 10% problems which could be addressed by this 10% amount. And therefore, if the risk is causing the damage of more than 10,000, then they have to sit down and plan how to deal with the risks which are beyond our appetite, which are not within our appetite. Appetite we have already addressed, but and we are comfortable with it. We have decided that, okay, we are putting aside this much money for risk management. But what if the risks are amounting 10 times more than that? Then we have to deal with them. Then we have to address them, right? That is where the responses are created. When you say that, okay, this is within my appetite, that means you have by default accepted this risk. You have accepted this risk because you had that kind of reserve available with you, right? But if it is not covered under the reserve, then you have to think, you have to strategize, you have to plan how to deal with this situation. This is called risk response planning. How would I respond to those risks which are beyond my appetite? Now, here I talked about the appetite, but appetite of an individual can be different from the appetite of a group. Appetite of a group could be different from the appetite of an organization. Your stakeholders and your team members, they also have their own appetites. When I'm talking about the risk appetite of my organization, then we will have to consider the appetite of everyone and take an average of that. And we would say, this is our organizational appetite. Our organization can absorb this much of risk comfortably. We have no problem with it. This thing can happen at the group level, at the department level, at the project level. So at every level, we have to consider our stakeholders, what appetite do they have? So before starting the plan, we must clearly understand the appetite of the whole organization, of our stakeholders, of our project, and then we will decide how are we going to deal with it. Now, I hope I gave you some idea about the concept of risk appetite. Now let's talk about risk attitudes. Different people have different attitude towards risk. Some are risk seeking. These are the people who are like always looking for risks. Well, this is good. This is a good characteristic, but it is not always good. A person who is seeking risk in the wrong places or for the wrong reasons might be harmful for the organization. For example, just to portray yourself as a very brave person, you pick fights with everyone. You are risk seeking, but for no actual use to anyone. Do you understand my point? Risk seeking is a good quality, but if misplaced, it could be dangerous.
Yep.
Right? You
Yeah.
say you claim to be a very brave person, a very risk seeking person, and you don't understand how to deal with the risk. And whenever there is a risk, you go and bang into it and you damage yourself. Right? A good risk seeker would be who plans it out, who takes the calculated risk. He will understand how much will be the injury if I bang into the wall, and he will try to reduce that injury to the minimum. Right? So don't treat risk seeking as a positive attitude. There is a negativity even in a risk seeking thing. Then there are people who are risk neutral. They don't entertain anything as a risk. They don't realize anything as a risk. They are just neutral in all these situations. Well, this is also not a very good attitude. A risk neutral person might be again may know the risk, but they don't want to take any action on it. They absolve themselves of any responsibility about that risk. This is a bad attitude, right? But the worst attitude is that you are so covered that as soon as someone mentions a risk, you close your eyes. You say, no, 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 this cannot happen to me. This is not possible. This is a person who is risk averse. Now you will find these type of attitudes, risk attitudes, in your stakeholders, in your team, in the people involved around you. So you have to very carefully analyze each stakeholder, what attitude this stakeholder has, how much appetite this stakeholder has, and then you will define the risk threshold for the project or for the organization. Risk threshold is up to how much limit can we absorb the risk. You understand my point? So in a way, I'm trying to say risk appetite is something we are comfortable with. We say, okay, this much risk is no problem to us. We can comfortably take it. But risk threshold is the limit within which you may not be comfortable in taking that, but you have decided that, okay, with a little bit of difficulty, we will accept the risk up to this limit. This limit is called risk threshold. This could be a limit of an individual or of the whole organization. But definitely, the risk threshold has to be determined at the organizational level, as if we can plan further. So far, so good?
Yep, so far so good.
Okay. Now, do you know which are too high to accept? Which risks are too high to accept?
Usually cost or it's because it all depends on scope, time and cost. Scope, time and cost.
But even scope, time, and cost, yes, you are right. They are the project objectives. Yes, you are right in saying that. But the thing is, what I'm saying is, what is too high to accept? That is, it is not within our appetite. It is
Okay.
not within our threshold. That is too
Mm,
high to accept,
okay.
right? That is primarily, this is what I mean, that this is outside of the risk threshold. That's why it is too high to accept.
Okay.
And which are low enough just to be accepted, these are within my threshold. Well, what you said is also right, because in a project, a risk will be considered if it is impacting the project objectives, the scope, the time, and the cost. Why I am not considering a risk in resources? If a resource, for example, a person assigned to a job doesn't appear in the office that day, what will happen? If there is a risk that this person will not appear in the office that day, then what will happen? What is the
Uh,
risk of that?
there are deliverables that will not be done that day.
Right. And the work will be delayed, right?
Mm. So it's time. It's a
So
time.
remember, the impact of the risk will always be on one of the project objectives, one or more. And project is scope, time, and cost, right? Whether it happens due to the risk, happens due to the procurement, it happens due to the stakeholder, from whatever the knowledge area the risk is coming from, the impact will always be on one or more project objectives, that is scope, time, and cost. If you have identified a risk, and you can't put a finger on it that you can't find out that this is how is it affecting the scope, our time, our cost, and you see no, it does not affect the scope, our time, or cost, then this risk does not qualify to be called a risk. A risk will be a risk if it is impacting the scope, time, or cost. If it is a risk to resources, for example, I will just say that person might not appear in the office that day, right? Well, it looks like a risk if it impacts my scope, my time, or my cost. If that person doesn't appear for the job and it doesn't impact my scope, it doesn't impact my timeline, it doesn't impact my cost, then why am I considering even this person? This resource risk is not a risk at all. Maybe I have a alternative person available. If he doesn't come, the other person will do the job. We have no problem whatsoever. Scope, time, and cost will not be affected by that. And therefore, I disagree with adding this risk in the risk list. This is not a risk. Risk will always be if it is impacting scope, time, and cost. And you were very right in saying that. Now, where do you record all the risks? In project management, especially in predictive project management, we compile a list of all the risks and we call it a risk register. And that not only the list, but some characteristics of those risks are also written in front of it. So that is the risk register where we record all the risks identified. But in Agile, we have a different name for it. Although the concept is the same, but in Agile, because risk management is done at the iteration level, so it is not a very comprehensive register, but we call it a risk list. How many risks are going to be there in our iteration? Not like a project, not like a risk register, which includes 300 risks. Risks for iteration would be a simple list of 5 or 10 or 20 risks. That means we will like to call them in Agile as a risk list. Okay, what are the management guidelines when you have identified the risks? We have to carefully analyze those risks, thoroughly analyze both the risks, and we have to apply qualitative analysis as well as quantitative analysis tools to do that. As if we can have exact rating of that risk determined. Now, this qualitative and quantitative, this we use in many places. We use it for analysis. We use it for estimation. We use it for so many other reasons. But for risk, we will do the qualitative analysis first, which is a broad categorization. It is not exact science. It does not give us a numerical figure. It gives us an approximation. Well, is it a big risk or a small risk? Like in agile estimation, we said we can use planning poker. We can use other means of doing a t-shirt sizing. They are qualitative tools. They are not quantitative tools. We don't get the exact value of the risk, but we get an idea about the risk. But if after the qualitative analysis, that qualitative analysis is very interesting because qualitative analysis will clearly indicate what is small and what is big. Those things which are small, why do you want to waste your time in doing a lot of calculations and finding out like a solving a numerical, finding the numerical value of that, that is not good at all. That is a waste of time. So, whatever is the result of qualitative analysis, what are the biggest of them all, I will only take them to quantitative level. So, quantitative is not mandatory. Qualitative is mandatory. But both of these techniques are available and we can use them in our risk assessment. Once you have assessed the risks, we have to set a maximum risk exposure level that can be managed without escalation. Now, this is again another very interesting point. You, as a project team, can deal with a certain level of risk. If a risk you have identified is beyond your call of duty, and maybe this can only be resolved by the higher authorities, in that case, you will definitely identify it, but you will not do anything about it. You will escalate it to the next higher level as if they can solve it. For example, a project manager has a risk and he's working under a program and he understands the similar kind of risk is going to be in other projects of the program as well. And it would be better if the decision on this risk is taken not by me, but by the program manager, because I can fix that for my project only. But program manager can fix that for all the projects. So if such a matter is there that is beyond the call of the duty of the project manager, he would forward or escalate that identified risk to the next higher authority as if they can take charge of them. This is the concept of escalation in risk. Escalation is everywhere. Issues are also escalated. Risks are also escalated. There are not many things which could be escalated. Decision making, we do escalation. I have a certain level to make decisions. If a decision is beyond that level, I have to escalate to the next higher authority. So escalation path must be clear and defined. Good?
Yep.
Okay.
Just a
Yes, please.
question, Suhil. Will you be sharing later, or this is it? How a typical risk register looks like? If there's examples.
Yeah, of course, of course. I'll come to that. I'll come to that. Right
Okay, good.
now,
Thank
I'm
you.
just giving you the concept. Later
Okay.
on, I'll show you the register and everything, but
Okay.
you have a general idea. There is a
Mm.
risk register, there is a risk list, and
Mm.
now I'm going to tell you what is our risk management plan. Well, we already understand, we have studied many knowledge areas. We have created a schedule management plan, a scope management plan, a requirements management plan, a cost management plan, and so on and so forth. Procurement management plan, stakeholder engagement plan, communication management plan. Just similar to those plans, we have a risk management plan. Risk management plan is not the detailed plan. This is the plan about the plan. How are we going to risk management planning? All the guidelines and instructions are given in the risk management plan. Following this risk management plan, we will be able to do our planning in detail, right? So physical identification of the risk does not happen in risk management plan, but risk management plan at least tells you how can you identify various risks. Qualitative analysis is not done in risk management plan, but it tells us what are the various tools you can use for qualitative and for quantitative risk analysis, right? So all the guideline is there. So risk management plan must not be treated as a risk register or a risk list. These are the project documents which will be created as a consequence of applying the risk management plan to real life. So, before you can develop a risk management plan, naturally there might be some guidance coming from top. That is through the governance, the project governance, which has been given to you, that will have these guidelines available. You can expand them in your risk management plan. The guidelines are expanded, but actual planning will happen based on the risk management plan. So before developing a risk management plan, you must understand the risk strategy of the organization. Just like the policy of the organization, as we followed in quality, in procurement. So there are policies there. So those policies are applicable to us. Similarly, what is the risk policy of my organization? What does the governance tell us? What should I include in my risk management plan? So set your initial risk strategy, then define and then refine it. You must consider various characteristics of the project, size of the project. If it's a big project, it might be more risky because it has more opportunities to have risk. If it is a complex project, maybe it is not very large, but whatever we have is very complex. That also indicates that there might be a lot many risks. Or if something is very important, you are working on a nuclear plant. Each moment and each move you make is very important and you have to be very careful about it. If you are working on a construction project, then you have to take certain precautions like wearing a helmet and all. So you have to look at the level of importance of the work, and your risk strategy will represent that thought. And also, what is the development approach we are using? Are we doing this project in a predictive manner, or an agile, or a hybrid manner? That also matters to determine your risk management plan. What should be included in your risk management plan? Not exactly telling you the format, but at least the important headings you should address in your risk management plan, about which guideline must be provided, is what is your risk strategy? What is the methodology you are using? What are the various risk-related roles and responsibilities which are going to be in your project? From where the funding for these risks is going to be made available? What is the timing of the risk? What are the various categories of the risk? Stakeholder risk appetite. You have to determine a comprehensive and collective appetite of all the stakeholders. I said every stakeholder may have a different risk appetite. So you have to somehow consolidate that, take an average of that, and then determine what is the overall risk appetite. Then, how do you define risk probability and impact? This definition of probability and impact may vary from situation to situation. So, specific to your project, what does determine a probability and what does determine an impact? So this may differ from organization to organization. Then this probability and impact, because these are the two elements of the risk. These two elements are actually a multiplication factor. If there are 10% chances of a loss of $10,000, that means only 10% of 10,000 is the cost, or is the loss of that project. Expected loss from that risk is not 10,000, but $1,000. This, we create a chart which we call the probability and impact matrix. And there we determine what is more dangerous, what is less dangerous. And I can show you that later.
Sorry, can you repeat the first word in impact chart? What's the first word?
Probability and impact.
Okay. Probability.
Probability is how uncertain you are about this risk. And impact is, if this risk occurs, what is the damage it is going to cause? Right? Then the risk management plan will discuss the various reporting formats. How would these different risks would be reported, or various reports about the risk? What are their formats, and when and how they will be communicated? Naturally, they will be all these formats will become part of the communication management plan, because all the communications are controlled there. But you are responsible for developing these formats for risk-related communication. And then you will devise a mechanism of tracking these documents. All documents relevant to risk, you are supposed to track them. This is all the guidance provided within the risk management plan. Well, you remember I have talked about this simple situation where you are close to certainty, there is not much of risk, and the requirements are also the both parties broadly, they are on the same page. They agree what we are going to do. Such a simple situation is a case for a predictive planning. As we move ahead, there is some uncertainty up till this level. There is some, disagreement up to this level, but still we have marked this parabola that this is the limit which can be dealt with predictive planning. But if we get out of this green zone, we get into the golden zone, that is where the complication has been added. Things have become more complicated. Thus, it means the uncertainty have increased and the disagreement has increased. So, this is essentially the zone, the golden arc. This is essentially the zone which cannot and should not be done in a predictive manner. We should either be applying the adaptive planning or adaptive approaches, or we can use the hybrid here. But as the things become even more complex, we are getting too far from certainty, and agreement is increasing, disagreement is increasing. It is a complex situation. It is a very dangerous situation, and it can only be handled by agile. Not even hybrid can handle that. No question, predictive can deal with it. So remember, predictive is not the only way of project management. If the complication and complexity increases, we may not do the predictive approach. We may have to resort in complex situations only to agile. And then there is a limit beyond which this chaos zone, chaotic area, which is shown in red, that is, we have extremely high uncertainty and absolutely no agreement. If your project falls in this zone, I would advise you not to do it, because this is undoable. Things are completely unknown, uncertain, and highly damaging. No agreement at all. So if you think your project has moved into the chaotic zone, then that is the time when you should suggest to your boss that this project is no more possible to be done. And therefore, it should be terminated abnormally. Maybe the business case of the project has failed. It is unexpectedly having too many risks. And therefore, dealing with so many risks is counterproductive because the money we need to deal with the risk is many times more than the budget of the government. So in such situation, we should abandon the project, terminate the project. So chaotic zone cannot be done by any approach. Okay, before we can start the individual processes, I would like you to take another break for 10 minutes, as if you can refresh yourself, and then we can restart.
Okay. Got it. Thank you,
So
Suhail.
your break starts now. Now that we have already talked about generally about risk, let us, yes, please.
No, we can go ahead.
Okay. Now let us move on with the first process of risk management, and that is risk identification. You see, we need to identify as many risks as possible, both positive and negative, small and large, internal and external. So try to capture as many as you could think of. Because no matter how much effort you put up, it is not possible to have recognized all the risks. Some risks will become identifiable after some time. But when you have to start, try to conceive, try to sit down and spend some time and collecting data about those risks and be able to identify them. So here are some data gathering and analysis techniques for risk identification. One method is called risk breakdown structure. We already know what is a work breakdown structure. You remember that? We studied in the schedule. Now,
Yep.
work breakdown structure was breaking down the project to smaller parts until we get to the work package level. How can we use similar kind of philosophy in risk management or risk identification? How could it help us? Risk breakdown structure could be, I could say, uh, the risks to the project may fall under four categories: technical risk, industrial risk, project risk, and this risk or that risk. So you categorize them into certain classifications and then further break down those classifications until you reach to an appropriate level which you can explore for identifying risks. That way, you will explore and identify risk in each one of those subcategories and thus will be able to capture many risks. You got my point?
Yep, yep. So, the how to say, the breakdown would be up to a point when it's actionable.
Yeah.
Would that make sense?
Categories, subcategories, and until till the last moment, beyond which there are risks, right? I will show you. This is a risk breakdown structure. In your project, all these sources of project risk maybe you could classify them like technical risks, management risks, commercial risks, external risks. I am not advocating any one of these classifications. You could create your own classification because every project is different from the other project. So I don't recommend that you only use this classification. Then break down each classification into further classes, like technical risk could be relevant to scope definition, requirement definition, estimate assumptions and constraints, technical processes, technology itself, and technical interfaces. Similarly, management risk could belong to these various categories and so on. Now, once you have this thing ready with me, and when I am having the risk identification meeting with my staff and stakeholders, I would say, okay, let's start with the risk breakdown structure. First, we will discuss the technical risks. In technical risks, uh, let us try to identify any risks to the scope definition. So we will have a discussion on that. We will note down, say, 5 to 10 different risks in that category. And once we are exhausted with it, we can move to the next and next. And if I can identify, say, 10 risks in each category, how many are these? We will have a rich content, 6 plus 6, 12, 6 in each category right now. So that is 24 categories. So at least 240 risks we can identify. You see how simple it is. But if you don't go by this method, you may be able to identify 30 or 40 risks only. Right? Do you see a problem with this method?
I think no significant problem if the project is really that complex.
Yeah, naturally, projects will be complex. But you see, it's a laborious process. It is a
Yeah.
long process. It takes time. So that is one downside to it. And second downside is, what if we forgot to mention our main category? There might have been a fifth category because we did not identify that and we did not divide it into subcategories. So we will altogether forget about identifying risks in that category,
Oh.
right?
Oh.
So that could be a problem. So we should be open-minded, and whenever we have to amend the risk breakdown structure, even while identifying risk, we should do that. But treat this as a basic guideline provided to us by the risk management plan. But we can improve it, we can add things to it, and more categories to it, and things like that. So this is a continuous process. And remember, like stakeholders, I said, identification of stakeholder and the identification of risk, both are continuous process. Although we put in more effort to identify as many as we can, but remember, you could never identify all of them. And therefore, throughout the life of the project, you will keep looking for more stakeholders and more risks. So this is a continuous process. Then what other tools we have? We have prompt list is like a grocery list. You go for shopping, you write certain pointers that I have to buy this, buy that. So this is a rough kind of a mechanism, not like a RBS, but still you can jot down certain points on a piece of paper that these are the areas in which I must look for risks. This is called a prompt list, right? Then we have got affinity diagram. Affinity diagram is a technique that allows large numbers of ideas to be classified into groups for review and analysis. So in a way, it is very similar to the risk breakdown structure. We have got many ideas and now we want to put them into separate pigeonholes, right? So it is kind of an affinity diagram is a reverse mechanism of the risk breakdown structure. Delphi technique, probably I mentioned it earlier to you when we were discussing data gathering and all. Delphi technique is to avoid or, get rid of group think. Group think is when more people are sitting in a gathering, they are influenced by others. So their opinion is not their own. Sometimes they start representing the opinion of others, right? Or maybe if you give an idea, someone will say, just judging from your timidness or personality, they would say, no, we don't entertain this idea because it is given by you, right? So there is like of a workplace bullying going on, and then maybe your boss is sitting there and his opinion is considered better than yours. Why? In a Delphi technique, we keep the opinion of each member private and secret. We don't tell who gave that idea, but every idea is discussed. So maybe we ask the participants to write down their ideas on a separate piece of paper and give that to the organizer. Organizer will, list down all the items collected from everyone and write them down on a whiteboard without mentioning who gave what idea. So we have kept you anonymous, and now we can have a comprehensive discussion on each topic without knowing who gave what idea. And this way, we can avoid the groupthink. Well, brainstorming is a very, very important tool here because risk identification is one area where we have to be a little more creative. When we are developing the breakdown structure, we are going logically drilling down. But you have to think out of the box as well. What else can happen to us? What else can happen to us? And when we do that, very stupid ideas may also be surfaced. Don't ignore them. They are important. Like, you did your risk breakdown structure and you tried identifying as many risks. Once you have done that, you have exhausted with all your opinions, then we say, okay, what else come to your mind? Now we started the brainstorming session. What else come to your mind? What can go wrong with our project? Because people have almost discussed everything, they don't have to repeat those points, but now they have to go wild and come up with any random idea. For example, one person stands up and he says, okay, you want me to be creative? I would say, what if aliens attack our project? They will do this. You understand my point? Well, this is quite a stupid kind of a argument, but still, someone will get a cue of it. Another person will say, okay, aliens won't be coming, but yes, what if the neighboring country attacks our country? How would it affect our project? You understand my point? So you see, out of a stupid idea, we got a very useful idea. So brainstorming is actually very useful. No idea is stupid. Everything is useful. But this is creative. This is not logical. We have to go creative in a lot many things. In stakeholder identification, in risk identification, in a lot many other things. But there are certain things where we should not use brainstorming. For example, we are having the stand-up meeting in a scrum, and you say, okay, what is your progress? What have you done today? What have you done today? You don't need to be creative about it. You're collecting facts. That's about all. We don't need to be creative. So some places we don't need to be creative, but this is one place where we need to be creative. Nominal group technique, I have already given you the definition. SWOT analysis, you already know. You do a SWOT analysis of your situation, do see what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are your opportunities, and what are your threats. Basically, opportunities and threats are risks. So you can extract opportunities and threats out of the SWOT analysis. That could be instrumental. Okay, another important thing, assumptions analysis. What is that? During the life of the project, when we start the project, a lot, many times, we don't have data, logical data to support our plan. So what we do is we put in certain assumption to as if we can keep moving ahead with our planning. But that assumption is just a placeholder. That may go wrong, that may go right. But this is not a fact. This is not a logical way of thinking. But just to fill in the blanks, we have plugged the hole with an assumption and we kept doing our planning. Remember, these assumptions are sinkholes. If this assumption goes wrong, it gives birth to a risk. So, whatever the assumptions you make during the life of your project, must keep noting them down separately, and all the assumptions must be analyzed during risk identification process as if to see which assumptions could result in a risk. Got it? Last but not the least is the Monte Carlo simulation. Well, I don't think we should be using it for identification purposes because this is more of a quantitative analysis tool. But still, looking at the previous Monte Carlo analysis, we may come up with new ideas about identification of certain risks. But this is not a very good tool as such. But as far as the creativity is concerned, brainstorming is concerned, Monte Carlo can also be considered as one of the risk identification techniques. So these are various techniques through which we can identify the risks. This is how risk breakdown structure may look like. When we are assessing the risks, as I said before, we have to do it in both manners. We do a qualitative risk analysis, we do a quantitative risk analysis. And I told you that qualitative risk assessment must be performed first. Should not get into quantitative directly. Only when the need be, then you will go into quantitative. But first do the qualitative analysis, which is subjective in nature. Whereas quantitative analysis is objective in nature. Do you understand the difference? Like, qualitative is like approximation.
Okay.
Quantitative is like accuracy. But we don't need to be accurate about everything. First, we need to, sort them out, which are the big risks. And then, if at all there still is a need to understand a risk better, we can dig deeper into that risk and do the quantitative analysis. But for all practical purposes, quantitative analysis does cover something else also. That is, what is the cumulative risk of this project? Or at what point at one point in project, how risky that point is. For example, the 10th day of the project, how risky is that is. That means If more than one risk occurs at that point in time on the 10th day, then what can you tell me how risky is that day? How much money should you have at that point? So that could be used, quantitative assessment can be used to do those kind of things. But generally, for the purposes of the assessment of individual risk, I suppose qualitative assessment is sufficient. Then I also told you that we have to look at the probability and impact. Probability is how much are the chances, what percentage is the possibility, the probability of that thing, that risk occurring, and if it occurs, how much damage it will cause. That is the impact. So we will subsequently see how does this probability and impact matrix look like. But if you just want to look at that definition, this is it. This is a kind of a grid for mapping the probability of occurrence of each risk and its impact in project on project objectives, as you said, scope, time, and cost. If that risk occurs, how does it impact the project objectives? And what is the probability of that occurrence and how much is going to be the impact? This is the data we need to be plotting a probability impact matrix. To establish a probability impact matrix, we first have to define certain criteria. And this criteria might differ from project to project, right? So you understand that one thing is the probability and the other thing is the impact. And impact could be caused by on scope, time, and cost, right? So I will, because they are all very important, so I will consider them also in my scale. But later on, I can cumulate the result of the scope, time, and cost to get to a single number, right? But I will consider scope, time, and cost, and sometimes we consider quality as well. And sometimes we say that quality and scopes is because it is subjective in nature, it could be written down like this in a same statement. Right now, these statements written under quality are more like relevant only to quality, but you could add a similar kind of column about scope as well. Anyways, let us see what we can do with it. First of all, let us describe a scale. Generally, it should be a scale from 1 to 5. 1 being very low, 2 is low, 3 is medium, 4 is high, and 5 is very high. And nil is 0, right? This is the ratings. Very low rating, medium rating, high rating, very high rating. Now, about the probability, you decide for your project. I am not going to tell you. You don't have to follow this template. But at least this template says if the risk is between 1 to 10%, it is considered a very low risk. If the probability is 11 to 30%, it is considered low, 31 to 50 medium, 51 to 70 high, and anything more than 70 is very high. I am not asking you to follow these scales. You can build your own scale as the need of your project is. Let us see how do we define the scale for time. It says if the delay in time is up to 1 week, that is considered very low. 1 to 4 weeks is considered low. 1 to 3 months is medium. 3 to 6 months is high. And anything more than 6 months is very high. Well, these might look like ridiculous figures because your project might be just 3 months long. How can you apply this criteria to that? So naturally, you have to define your own criteria, right? Similarly, you could do that with the cost as well. Overspending of less than $100,000 is considered low, very low. Overspending of $100 to $500,000 considered low. 501 to 1 million is medium. 1 to 5 million is high, and more than 5 million is very high. I would say this might be true for a mega project, but for small projects, these figures are not representative. And therefore, you may design your own scale as far as the cost is concerned. As I said, the quality and scope both are subjective terms, so it will not be numbers, but it would be statements. We don't have an example of scope given here, but at least we have quality, so that will give us a fair idea. It is talking about two kinds of functionality in quality. One is secondary functionality, and one is overall functionality. And then it also talks about key functionality. So these are the things it is measuring. It is saying if there is a minor impact on secondary functionality of the project, it will be considered very low. If there is a minor impact on the overall functionality, it could be considered low. If there is some impact on key functional areas, which are very important, that would be treated as medium. Significant impact on overall functionality, we will consider as high, and very significant impact on overall functionality will be considered very high. Right? Now, once you have developed this scale, let us, make two columns only, the probability and impact. Actually, the remaining columns, except for the probability, the rest of the columns are actually giving us the impact. So maybe for your project, you think time, cost, and scope and quality, they all carry equal value, right? Then take a simple average and create a scale. For example, here, don't talk in terms of months and money, but we will ultimately be able to allocate very low, low, medium, high, and very high. That is 1 to 5. So, for example, in time, we are 3, in cost, we are 4, and in quality, we are 5, then probably the average will be 4. So we will consider the impact of that specific risk as 4. Right? So please do not be confused by these columns for time, cost, and quality, because they are just adding up to the impact. Whereas probability, we do have a scale. Very low means 1. 1 is this much percentage, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. Now, once we have these numbers for probability as well as for impact, both sides we have 1 to 5 numbers. Now look at this probability and impact matrix. This matrix is like impact is being shown for the severity from 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, as I just discussed with you. And probability or the likelihood is shown as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 being the lowest. 1 being the lowest here, and 1 being the lowest here. 5 being the highest here, and 5 being the highest there. Okay, you remember I said for every risk, probability is multiplied by impact. So what if I multiply this one with this one? What will I get at the cross section? 1. So let us multiply these figures, all of them. So we get 25 here, 5 into 4, 20 here, 4 into 4, 16 here, 3 into 3, 9 here, 3 into 2, 6 here, and so on. So now we have written the numbers here. Now let us color code them. We say that if the number is, say, larger than 16, will be treated as very high. If the number is larger than 12 and less than 20, it will be considered high. If the number is more than 6 and less than 16, it will be considered as medium. If it is more than 2 and less than 9, it will be considered as yellow area. And if it is from 1 to 2, it will be considered as very low area. Now you have this chart and you understand this chart and you know how was it created, right? Now let us enlarge this chart to a very big thing, which you can, like a carpet, you can put it down on ground. So there will be big boxes. Each box will be big enough, right? Maybe, 10 feet by 10 feet or 20 feet by 20 feet. So you could lay down that chart on ground, and then all the members who are identifying the risk, they are asked to stand around it. Then we say, okay, you all have post-it notes. Please write a risk each. Everyone writes a risk with its probability and its impact and puts the risk in the appropriate box, right? You have identified a risk which has a probability of 4 and an impact of 4. You will put that sticker in this red area. Another, let me put these various markers, like, for example, this is one risk I'm placed here. Treat it as a post-it note. There is one here, everywhere. Not many. There are hundreds of risks. So they will be here, there. In some of the boxes, there will be a lot many risks here, there. You see, these are all the risks. And the whole team has contributed in identifying these risks. And now what we are doing is, we are doing the qualitative analysis. And qualitative analysis, we have set the rule, anything in the red or purple area would be considered appropriate for risk response planning. I mean, for that matter, I am trying to say that these are the biggest of them all. The smaller ones, although they are many, but they carry lesser weight because they are smaller in size. So I will pick out only those risks which are in red and purple area, and I will take them to the next level. So I have done my qualitative analysis by this simple exercise of making this big chart and putting it on the ground and telling the team members to put the risks in the appropriate box. And then you see our qualitative work has been completed in a fraction of a time. It didn't take ages. It didn't take days. It took just, say, 45 minutes or even maybe 30 minutes. This exercise can be done in very short period of time. Okay? I must give you the Pareto law, which says, which is also called 80-20 rule. 80% of the risks will have 20% of the impact, and 20% of the risk will have 80% of the impact. Agree or not?
Yep, agree.
So these are only 20% of the risk, but they are having 80% of impact. They are all on the other period. They may be, if you count them, they are 80% in number, but they are so small that their impact would be just around 20%. So using that law, Pareto law, we ultimately find that only these risks are big enough to be treated as a risk, right? Everything else, we will accept it, or we will put it into, we will not analyze them any further. We'll put them all, 80% of these risks, we'll put them all into a bag and we will allocate us a contingency allowance for them without calculating. And how can I determine the contingency? Right? Let's look at these 20% risk which have been selected. We will develop risk responses and we'll sum up, okay, what is the total risk response for these big risks? For example, that comes out to be $100,000. That is the money of the contingency I need for these 20% of risks, right? If it is $100,000, how much? Sorry, let us not say 100,000. Let us say it is $80,000, right? It is $80,000. Then how much money should I keep for all of these risks?
Plus 20
That is
per
1/4 of that,
1/4.
20%.
Uh,
80% of risks carry 20% of weight.
mm,
So just $20,000, $80,000 for the main risk and $20,000 for the smaller risk. So I don't have to bother about it. I'll keep that $20,000 separate. And whenever a smaller risk has occurred, I will address that from that money.
so then the actual risks that are in the risk register or the risk list are the ones that are the red ones.
They all are actual risks, but some are bigger risks, some are smaller risks. The bigger risks, which are 20% of number, and they carry 80% of weightage, they are to be deliberately calculated. We have to develop a risk response plan for each one of them, right? But this is called risk response planning. We have to plan for them. Whereas we don't have to plan for the rest of them. We just have a contingency amount reserved. If they occur, we accept them. I mean, we pay for that. Whatever the loss is, we pay for that. But as far as these big risks are concerned, I am strategizing and trying to find various methods of minimizing these probabilities and impacts.
Okay, okay. Okay, okay. This is interesting. I haven't thought of it this way. This is good, I think, good practice. And I think this is actually what happens.
Right. Actually, this is how things should happen, but people don't use it. People are not really educated enough for risk management. They do
Yeah.
identify risk, they don't analyze the risk. They don't do the qualitative and quantitative analysis. Right now, what I am talking about is just the qualitative analysis. This is just the qualitative analysis.
But this is good enough so that we don't have like analysis paralysis.
Exactly, exactly. That is the very right word used by you.
Uh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes, please.
No, no, no. All good. Thank you. I finished taking my notes.
So to say again.
I just finished taking my notes, so okay to continue.
Okay, please, please. You can take the notes and tell me when you are ready.
We're ready, ready.
Okay. So let's move on. You understand what is the probability and impact matrix, and that is so interesting. I personally think that I like to have fun with these kind of exercises when we
Mm.
are calculating these things in the team, in the organization. This is like fun. This is interesting, right? Make it fun exercise. Okay, you asked how does a risk register look like? So this is how it may look like. You see, here we have got the risks listed. You could also add a column for the number. It is very important to give a number to every risk. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the list should be numbered. Then you could describe the impact in description here in front of the risk. What if this risk occurs? What is going to be the damage? I would say I would like to divide my risk statement in 3 parts. I would like 3 columns for that. First is the cause, then is the risk, and then is the impact. That would be more beautiful. That would be even better. So this is room for improvement, and you could create your own, uh, format for that. Anyways, after that, we are providing the impact scale. Remember, we calculated from 1 to 5. So what is the score of this risk, the impact of this risk from 1 to 5? The first one is 5, second is 5, and the third is 3. And what is the probability? That is 1 for the first one, 2 for the second one, 3 for the third one. Now, let us multiply them. 5 into 1 is 5, 5 into 2 is 10, and 3 into 3 is 9. That is impact multiplied by probability. And that way we understand, apparently from this chart, that the biggest number is 10. And 10 is probably the highest risk, isn't it? Anyways, what is the trigger condition of this risk? Remember, I told you every risk has a trigger condition, like we gave the example of raining, right? So there must be clouds. So what is the trigger condition? Say supply chain issues for correct breaks. The indicator could be supplier notification. There is a notification for a supplier that we won't be able to fulfill the supply chain or things like that. Or we won't be able to provide you the correct breaks. So you should be warned, you should take actions right there and then. Then whatever the response you create out of it, you can write that in the next column, which is the action plan. And then you must assign an owner to every risk. Every risk must have an owner. So write the name of that person as if you can ask that person for the progress on that risk. This is the risk register, which is used in a predictive project. In Agile project, I suppose the things are same, but because we are kind of we're not creating these kind of documentation. So everything is on the wall. It is apparently displayed on the wall. So maybe we can shorten this up and we could write something like a risk list, right? We have kind of summarized it. We have written the risk, a probability, impact, and magnitude. This chart could be sufficient, right, for an iteration, right? But if you think that other columns can be added, like who is the owner, what is the status of the risk, what is the date identified, date resolved, active time, days active, and resolution strategy. Yes, of course, on your discretion, you could add more columns to this. But this is the minimalist version where we just show the probability, impact, and magnitude. Well, they have used a different scale here. They have used a 1 to 10 scale here, 1 to 10 for impact, but that doesn't matter. You use a scale for 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, that doesn't make it more accurate, right? It serves the same purpose. Okay, then comes the quantitative risk analysis. Now, we have done the qualitative job. In the previous slides, what we have done was the qualitative. So after the qualitative analysis has been done, and we have put the rest of the smaller risk into a bag, and we have given allocated $20,000 to that, and we said, if something happens to you, if some risk out of this bag does occur, we will accept it. We'll pay for it from that $20,000. Now, let us look at the quantitative. I said quantitative analysis can be done. Maybe if a risk is doubtful, it is not really very clear, it was a big risk, but we want to exactly determine the dollar value associated with that risk, yes, you can do that, but I would say still that this is a wastage of time. Quantitative risk should be used for the overall purposes. How risky is this project? Naturally, if I add up all the threats and opportunities, I will get the total risk value for this project, where opportunities are positive and negative and threats are negative. If my answer comes out to be positive, that means this project has got more opportunities than threats. If my answer comes out to be negative, this project has less opportunities than threats. So that would be quite apparent. And a beautiful way of representing that is a sensitivity analysis, which method is called tornado diagram. So what we have done is we have drawn these bars. The biggest risk is on top, and the smallest risk is at the bottom. Right? According to the size of the risk, we are going downwards. Largest risk first and smallest risk at the end. Why are some bars on the right-hand side and some bars on the left-hand side from the center? This is the center established, and positive risks are shown on one side and negative risks are shown on negative side. Right? So without adding everything up, it will form a shape of a tornado. I hope you can imagine how it makes a shape of a tornado, because tornado.
But Suhail, how are they ranked to become a tornado? Is it by the absolute number, like regardless if it's positive or negative, just
Well,
rank them from top to bottom,
okay.
regardless of the sequence of the activities?
They could be approximate numbers. They don't need to be quantifiable numbers. They could be approximate numbers,
Okay, but their
right?
sequence is the sequence from top to bottom is the sequence of the tasks.
Which is the biggest risk?
Biggest risk.
We have prioritized the risk. We said this is the biggest risk. The first biggest risk was positive, so it was plotted on the right. Second biggest risk was positive, again plotted right. And a third biggest risk was a threat, it is plotted left, and so on. And when we look at it from distance, it looks like a tornado coming your way.
Okay, and then the size of the risk. How to how to
You
Okay,
see,
so maybe risk based on
it is
risk
the
score.
correlation with the project duration. Out of
Uh,
the total project duration, how much time it will, waste.
so only on
Say
time.
your project is 100 days, so the biggest risk can delay your project by 30 days. The
Uh,
second biggest risk can delay this project by 20 days, and things like that. So this is kind of a correlation with the project duration. It is just an approximation. This is not an exact figure, but
so
at least,
size,
yes.
no, duration, just duration with the activity. Okay, okay. So okay,
Got it? So
got it.
this is the sensitivity analysis of the tornado diagram. We have got other methods. Simulations is a beautiful method in which we do statistical calculation and we ask the computer to tell us, because Monte Carlo simulation is a very complicated calculation and humanly it is not possible. What we do is we say, for example, we use a 3-point estimate here, right? You remember the 3-point estimate?
3-point estimate. Wait, I cannot remember.
Most likely, likely, pessimist,
Ah,
optimist. Remember
okay.
that?
Ah, yes, yes.
So if we do not calculate the estimated time from that and we just take the three values, optimistic, pessimistic, and most likely, and we can play around with that through a computer program. We can say, we don't know this activity could be 2 days or 10 days or 4 days. You pick your choice. Between 2 and 10, you pick your choice for each activity randomly and dry run this project and tell me how much time it will take to finish. And then do this simulation 1,000 times. Do this simulation 1,000 times and then give me a statistical average of that, which would be, what is the most likely duration this project is going to take. Got it? Now, what is the duration you calculated? For example, you said this project can be done in 60 days, but this Monte Carlo simulation tells you that I have run this 1,000 times and my estimation quantitative statistical calculation says that this project can take up to 80 days. Then we ask the computer, okay, what are the chances that we can complete that in 60 days? So he will calculate, it will calculate a percentage for you. It would say there are 80% chances that you can achieve this target. But there is a risk of 20% that the project will be delayed. You understand my point? This is just because of the Monte Carlo simulation. We can draw so many results out of it. We can tweak our project and we can do things beautifully. This is what real quantitative risk analysis is all about. This is about the whole problem. This is
But
about
it's
the use of statistics on the project and using tools which otherwise humanly not possible to use them. But they give us a very good idea where we are and how should you apply the correction to your project.
okay. But how effective is this? Like,
Very effective. Very effective.
oh, okay.
You have to learn these things actually. Naturally, I can't draw all those charts in front of you because this is complicated statistical calculation. But I have learned it. I know this can be done, and this is very instrumental. Just like in Agile, we said that whatever estimates are we are making, they make sense, although they are approximate. They are qualitative data, but that makes a lot of sense. That is more accurate than the detailed bottom-up estimate, right?
Yeah.
It produces better results. So statistics is always good. That always produces better results.
Okay.
So quantitative risk analysis methods, other methods could be like decision trees, influence diagrams, expected monetary value, and a lot many other things like that. Do you know about decision trees?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Influence diagram is a simpler, is a kind of uh, when something cannot be done through decision trees and decision tree is becoming very complicated and very crowded, then we resort to influence diagrams. Uh, this is a quality management graphical aid. It shows elements of uncertainty caused by risk using ranges or probability distribution. Again, just like we are using use of statistics. These are statistics. And then in your decision trees, we can use expected monetary value, right? If you like, I can, in the next class, I can give you some examples of these.
Okay. I'm particularly interested on um in yeah, I'm looking forward to examples. I haven't seen influence diagrams.
Influence
And,
diagram.
and how and the expected monetary value.
Let
Looking
Let me
forward to
show you the definitions of that.
Mm.
Influence diagram is used in quality management decisions. It is a graphical representation of situations showing causal influences. Like you see, what are the possibilities? This can happen, this can happen, this can happen. If this happens, then there is a series of events. These things can happen. So decision tree is also doing the same thing at a smaller scale. But if the things become very complicated, we can use the influence diagram. I don't have a diagram here for to show you, but this is how it works. Time ordering of events, other relationships among variables and outcomes. But if you want to learn more about the influence diagram, I would suggest you search it out on internet, and you will definitely find some document specifically written on the influence diagram, and you will learn out of it. But as far as the PMP exam is concerned, if you know the definition and you know the concept, that is sufficient for you. Okay, so I close my session today here on slide number 157, and I promise you that I will give you the examples of these things tomorrow,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
So see you tomorrow,
Yep. See
and
you tomorrow.
I hope you are satisfied so far. Things
Yep. So
are
far. Thank you, Suhail, and have a great
okay.
day.
No questions?
No, no, it's a lot of information every day. So, and I already asked my questions during the session, so thank you.
Sure, sure, sure. Okay, then. Thank you very much and take care. We will meet
Thank
again
you.
tomorrow.
Yep. See you
Take care and
tomorrow.
bye-bye.
Wait, tomorrow's Friday, so we meet
Oh, I'm
next.
sorry. I'm sorry. I mean the next class on
Yeah.
Monday.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank
What
you,
did
Suhail.
we decide for the extra class? Did we decide
Uh,
anything?
yeah, we did decide on the 30th on the
Oh,
same
yes.
time.
Okay. 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 Thank you very much and take care then. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.